Virtual reality, a very important trend, number 8. You know, it's funny, but one of the first things which we did in Singapore back in 1995, we opened a computer store in Simlim Square, right? So a bunch of Russians. And we had good contacts with suppliers in Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, and US. One of the suppliers we had a good contact with was actually a company which ended up being sold to Facebook, Oculus. So it was predecessor of that company. It was making virtual reality headgears. And we were the first importers of virtual reality headgears, exclusive exporters to Malaysia, Singapore, and Russia at that time. And actually, this was the first time when I met Singapore government officials. Goh Chek Tong, who was a prime minister at that time, visited our the computer exhibition in actually NTUC exhibition center, and we were displaying this virtual reality headgear. And they brought him to our center, and he's quite big, right, and tall. He has big head, and for a while when he was trying to sort of put this on his head, we were scared that it wouldn't work because it wouldn't fit, right? But eventually he put it on. It wasn't very useful. It was 1995. I think about last year or the year before, the company which we were distributing was then went bankrupt, was bought by another company, which then went bankrupt, which was bought by another company, which became Oculus, which was bought by Facebook, right? So now it's becoming real. Predicted to be $70 billion market by 2020. Google Cardboard cost as little as $90, so it looks like this. You know, the guy who makes presentation for me, he said like he was trying to find photos of Google Cardboards, and apparently everybody who has it, they open it. Do you have it? So maybe it means it's amazing. Oculus Rift is set, that's the one we brought to Singapore. It looked much uglier at that time. It's set for release March 28th. Anybody tested it here? You tested? How is it? That doesn't sound very promising, interesting. I bought a Google Glass, and we actually gave it as presents to a number of people, and most of them were not able to wear it for a very long time. So Google Glass was really a bad flop. And you know, people will get headaches, and some of them will try to wear it, but would not be able to do it for a long time. So what are the use cases? Gaming, healthcare, design, customer experience. But personally, I think the main use case is communication. So I remember at some point when I actually was already a little tired with venture business, I was thinking maybe, I mean, I didn't want to go back to Acronis. It was split from Parallels, and for me, I thought it's sort of boring to deal with data. I was thinking to solve one of the problems which is annoying for me in this modern world. And this problem is that if I need to have a meeting in Sao Paulo with somebody to discuss an important contract, I have to fly to Sao Paulo. And it takes about 40 hours to get to Sao Paulo, maybe 35 or 36 from here. And so I arrive to Sao Paulo, and then it takes 4 hours from the airport to get to the meeting. And then I meet somebody for 1 hour, so 40 hours, and then I fly 40 hours back. Very inconvenient. It's amazingly inconvenient in the modern technology. Why? Because in order to talk to somebody, you need to actually you need to have multiple things. One thing, you have to hear his voice, right? That you can do. Another thing, you have to actually have high definition audio so that you hear the intonations which he uses in his voice, because those intonations allow you to hear the tonalities, allow you to understand whether he's lying or not lying, whether he's certain or not certain, whether he's stressing something or not stressing something. So whenever you discuss an unimportant topic, you can talk on bad phone connection, but whenever you need to discuss something very complex, you need very high definition connection. Well, now in addition to that, you need to have a video so that you can see his facial expressions. Then you need to see where he looks. You need to see what is his focus. You need to see whether he looks at you or whether he looks up, whether he looks this way. Then in addition to that, you need to see what happens with his body. Did he lean back? Did he lean forward? And then finally, you need to synchronize all of it in such ways that your brain can automatically understand the meaning of what the person is saying. And the fact of the matter is one of the most amazingly complex things in the world today, which is not known how it works, is human intelligence, is human creativity. And the origin of human creativity is most likely coming from the point when people needed to understand each other. So our brain is primarily a machine to understand what other humans are saying and meaning, and that means actually seeing them in action. And that's why when I need to discuss a complex contract, I cannot do it on the phone. I need to fly to Sao Paulo from Singapore. What happens with this, you can actually connect in virtual space, right? So you can see a virtual copy of somebody, and you know, if with the right technology, your virtual copy of you can be presented to somebody in a very realistic way. You can make an avatar of yourself, which may be a 10 gigabytes avatar, which encodes your gesticulation and facial expressions, but this avatar can need only to be downloaded one time. And so that's why I think Facebook is investing in it, because you would be able to socialize in person with people who are remote. That's amazing opportunity. I mean, it's not good for Singapore Airlines, but it's good for me. I hate flying, right? So then big data, that's another trend which has been around for a while, but you know, frankly speaking, I only understood it about 2 years ago. This is just a good example of what big data is about. So there is this wonderful company called Chevron. At some point, not right now, now with oil crisis, the numbers are much worse. It had about $220 billion in revenue, $41 billion in EBITDA, and had a market cap of $220 billion. And the fact of the matter is, much of the oil it makes, it is produced from imperfect shafts, and such shale shafts can generate about 3,000 petabytes per day on all of them. And so if they, for example, use S3 for this, that will be about $450 billion, so very expensive, a lot of data. If they use their own storage, that's outdated. I should have to update the slides, but it will be about $41 billion. However, if they are able to store all of this data and in real time open and close the right parts of the shaft, they will be able to optimize oil flow, and they might be able to improve their EBITDA by 15 billion, just $15 billion, right? So they basically can use the data to extract money. Big data is about making money from data, right? So what they can do is that they have those holes in those shafts, and these holes, they suck oil, water, and sand. And when they suck too much sand and too much water, they should close them, because it's actually making it impossible to clean the oil. But when it's below a certain quantity, they should open them. And so they should dynamically open, close those holes, and that can optimize their EBITDA. And so companies can make big profits on big data. That's not only related to oil. It's also related to, for example, car industry. You can do the same with engines. It's also related to airline industry. Most of manufacturers of engines, such as Rolls-Royce and General Electric, they're switching to the model where they charge for the usage of the engine, and they have those sensors on the engines. As we all know from Malaysia airline flights, they're constantly supplying information to the back end, and it's constantly analyzed, and the General Electric is constantly trying to optimize how the engines work to decrease the spend of oil. And finally, this big data is becoming very useful for all of us, because one of the problems of the data in the past, all of us have a lot of data. Like I have computers since, personal computers since 1992. There's a lot of data about me, but what to do with it? But with analytics, you can actually analyze it and extract some interesting sense from it automatically. Another big trend, very important, is artificial intelligence. You know, this is IBM Watson, $100 million revenue right now. So people are using it for something. They expect to be $1 billion by 2019 and $10 billion by 2024. Facebook can recognize faces very, very well. Also very important. Another major problem, how to identify that you is you. If you have a proper virtual reality headgear, it will know that it's you, and you will be knowing that you are actually talking to the right person. Microsoft just bought this SwiftKey in a deal worth $250 million. So useful thinking machines are available right now. This is an example of the machine which helps people with low vision to read. But that's another information. For me, artificial intelligence is about the fact that most of the world today is full of stupid devices which do not learn. We use the devices, they do not learn. Artificial intelligence is not about something sort of like in Terminator movies, but it's just about making our devices smarter. We continuously use the device, we continuously do something, the device can learn and start helping us. And another big trend, which I think is one of the 11 important trends, is privacy. Privacy is becoming a major problem. And as the world is converting to digital, and again, there is a threshold. So today, we're still a lot physical, right? So a lot of what we do is physical, and a lot of what happens to us requires physical verification. As we move forward, sometime over the next 30 years, maybe 10 years, everything becomes digital. And when everything becomes digital, we completely lose privacy. And in some sense, and I'm sorry if I've actually offended somebody's religious views, it's amazing how people 1,000 years ago, they predicted sort of a judgment day, right? Because the ultimate judgment day is when every piece of data about what you do is available, right? So in that case, you cannot hide anything, because what's available about you is where you were, what did you do, maybe even what did you think. Maybe what was your blood pressure, maybe what was your blood contains, maybe what was your pulse at a certain point, where you looked with your eyes specifically. You cannot escape any question. Technically, the person who has access to all of your information can completely control everything you did. So you really are completely open to somebody who has this information. And it's nice when you think about, and people always think about this and they say like, okay, NSA, as we were told by Ed Snowden, has information about all of us. But that's okay, right? NSA is usually good guys. When you see the movies, sometimes occasionally you see some bad guys there, but most of them are, they are pro-democracy and they're nice. So they're not going to do anything bad with us. Well, the reality is that as soon as the good guys have the data, it's already vulnerable to get to the hands of bad guys, just even because the bad guys can pretend to be good and enter NSA and get the data. But also because that if the good guys got the data, bad guys could get the data as well. And so one very interesting announcement which happened last year in August, and NSA have officially announced that they need to convert to post-quantum and quantum-resistant algorithms, that public key encryption is no longer enough, right? And all of the US government organizations, in terms of standard, they have to use post-quantum encryption or some degree of quantum-resistant encryption. What it tells us, it means that probably they can decrypt it very easily. And so that means that whatever you encrypt with conventional means, they can decrypt. My friend, who is one of the world security gurus, once told me, if you forgot what you said on the phone, don't worry, it's recorded by NSA, right? So there are some cures of it, like new generation secure and quantum communication. Just recently, Barack Obama announced amazing bill, $19 billion budget for bolstering cybersecurity in federal government. And one thing which I want to remind you guys is that here in Singapore, there is this wonderful Center for Quantum Technology. Anybody work for the center here? Nobody, right? But it's in NUS. It's one of the leading in the world. And the guy who actually founded the center, he's actually one of the key inventors of quantum cryptography, which is the only private way to communicate known to science, protected by science. But of course, science could be wrong as well. It's better, though, than be protected by NSA. Right? So final trend, and I've just also learned about this trend recently, and it's quite amazing, is a trend that there is next generation computing which needs to come around. Gordon Moore have actually published his Gordon Moore law in 1965 in this article. Have anybody actually read this article here? You should read it. It's fun, right? So it's 50 years ago, 51. And he only predicted that it will last 50 years. And also it's amazing how humans are much better than anything in predicting things, not only about the judgment day, but also about such basic thing like Moore law, because Moore law is already actually not working today. So to some extent, modern computers are not getting faster and faster and faster. And so that requires fundamental change in the architecture. So there are a number of things like chemical computing, like neuron-inspired Haas-based computing, and most interestingly, memristor-based computing, which is tried by HP Labs. There is this very interesting lecture which is on YouTube. Stanley Williams gave this lecture while he was here. Anybody has been to his lecture, Stanley Williams lecture? It was given to Singapore Quantum Center, but it's an amazing lecture about the fact that modern computers are not very effective. And they're not very effective on two major counts. One of the major counts is that the artificial intelligence, machine learning, and those are fancy sounding things, but non-fancy sounding pattern recognition, modern computers are highly inefficient. They are very inefficient. They spend a lot of power. For our brains to recognize somebody's face, even in case a person sits very far and it's in the crowd, it takes a second and it consumes very little power. For a computer, it may take a long time and it will be very imprecise and it will spend a lot of watts, right? But more importantly, modern computers are very power inefficient. So they are thousands of times less power efficient than human brain. And human brain shouldn't be very efficient thing. If you think about how human brain is organized, if you have ever looked into any books about human brain, it does look very messy, right? So you would imagine that if you design something, it can be, another 1,000 times better than human brain. And so we are at the time when we are moving from, last 50 years of von Neumann architecture to a completely new architecture. One of such architectures could be this The Machine by HP. But there are a number of ways to go after the Moore law will expire, which will happen to a catastrophic thing over the next 5 years. So that's great. So that's a real trend. All of those trends represent major opportunities. For a faculty like this, I guess this is probably the most interesting one. There are some other trends, such as quantum computers, right? So this is a quantum computer, which is bought by Google, built by D-Wave. It's not really a universal quantum computer, but it does do some very interesting quantum algorithms, such as, for example, factorizing numbers in a better way than exponential, which, of course, makes it possible to decrypt things. And this is a quantum computer which is built by Canada. Anybody know about this D-Wave? Okay, good. Well, what's good about quantum computers? I'll tell you what's good. There are a number of things which are good. So one thing which is very popular to be told to be good is that it makes it much better to, much easier to factorize numbers and to basically decrypt, right, things. And that makes all the world insecure. If there is a quantum computer, you can decrypt any data which was encrypted, most of the data which was encrypted with public key encryption in the past, whatever, 50 years, if you have access to this data. Well, it sounds important, not super important, but important. It also makes it possible to search patterns in various things in much better fashion. There are a lot of algorithms about pattern searching in quantum computers, which potentially enables much better artificial intelligence or even super intelligence. It also makes it possible to actually emulate new materials. And so you can design new materials with amazing properties because new materials are governed by quantum mechanics, but it's very difficult to emulate quantum mechanics with large number of particles. You can emulate them on quantum computers. But most importantly, when the quantum computers become reality, and every year there is progress in this field, quantum computers might be used for things which we don't know about. There is a lot of algorithms and a lot of things you can do on quantum computers which are unimaginable on normal computers. And of course, there are things beyond quantum computers, which when I was growing up, they looked like a complete science fiction. And if you think about it, when you read some of the science fiction of about 100 years ago, a lot of the things which were in that science fiction are actually very much reality today. But one of the things is teleportation, right? So it's probably even better. I mean, of course, it's good to convey in virtual reality, but it would be nice to teleport yourself to San Paulo and teleport back, right? And apparently, it's not impossible. Quantum mechanics and modern science does not prohibit teleportation of your quantum state. And so this is some example. So Geneva researchers teleported a photon state, basically teleported the particle 25 kilometers. So, after some time, you might go into such machine and boom, you are in San Paulo. And at that time, it's already very nice. and maybe time machine is next, right? Who knows? Who knows? This is back to the future time machine. Again, there's a lot of branches of modern science which believes that it's possible to design the form of time machine, which would allow you to go back in time and then branch out to a different part of the universe, perhaps the one where you're more lucky with your endeavors, right? So lots of interesting things can happen, and they accelerate very fast with the way how computing accelerates in the world. So how to distinguish those trends? I've asked myself this question because I was thinking that I myself have participated in cloud computing, and as a part of it, I've participated in inventing some of the things which are core infrastructure of the cloud computing, such as virtualization and containers. But there was a lot of trends which I missed, right? For example, I completely missed social networks. So I've created my Twitter account in 2009, and by that time, this was, everybody who knew, they already had a Twitter account, right? And so I've realized that the trends can be separated in this sort of three main categories. Trends for startups. Saving time, that's historically what IT did, productivity, right? So initially, IT was about productivity. Making money, profit center, you can make money on something, directly making money. And finally, satisfying primary instincts. If you find a trend which can satisfy primary instinct, it's a very powerful trend. So for a while, I did not understand what is Twitter, right? I didn't use it, and I didn't understand why is it important or why Facebook is important. But I've only came to realize that it's important when I traveled to London and I seen the speaker's corner, right? There is a speaker's corner in London in Hyde Park where there is this people who come with boxes and they climb on these boxes and they keep talking to the audience even in case there is no audience. Because apparently there is this basic human instinct, talk to the audience and listen to somebody talking. That's a basic human instinct. And so if you create a tool which satisfies basic human instinct, it's very powerful. There's a basic human instinct to share with friends. I came up with this explanation right around 2010. And I've even hired a psychologist together with I would say one of the investors in my company, Jeremy Levine from Bessemer Venture Partners. And he basically created the list of basic human instincts. And apparently one of the instincts he listed was collection instincts. And based on this prediction, my partner invested in Pinterest. So he invested, I remember, $8 million at $40 million post-money valuation in a company which had 7 people and just a prototype and nothing else, right? So $32 million pre-money for 8 people and nothing. And today, the last valuation was $11 billion. Any of you use Pinterest, right? It's kind of funny, right? So Pinterest is an amazingly stupid tool, but apparently there is a large percentage of population, especially female, who like to collect things. So it's a basic human instinct to collect. They like to collect. They have to have multiple things, and Pinterest allows to collect things. And by the way, Pinterest is even making money, and there is a lot of other humans who like to look at somebody's collections. And it's not everybody, and as you're not part of this group, you wouldn't understand it, but apparently it's very sticky, and I think Pinterest is many hundreds of millions, maybe $1 billion in revenue right now already, because they realize how to actually, they figure out how to realize this collection instinct. But it's very important to be satisfying primary instincts. Apparently, there are 2 other things which are good, but they're not good for business. It's powers and fame, right? So you can't make that much money on powers and fame. So, but other human instincts are good. So let's think about what we have. So Internet of Things is about productivity. And that's one of the reasons why it's taking such a long time. Robots, it's probably also about productivity, and it's also taking a long time. If you think about it, when I was in school, I watched this movie about this robot, you know, which was invented and then it ran away. It was on this, I forgot, do you remember this movie? Yeah. Huh? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, right, short circuit. So that was supposed to be a trend then, 30 years ago, and it's only becoming a trend now. Drones, again, what's new about drones? I mean, US Army was using drones for a very long time. Self-driving cars, also not very new. And finally, 3D printing. Those things are about enhancing productivity. So those take long time to take up. You know, it's moderately better to use those things. But you know, one thing which is good is when they pick up, they could be really big. Then making money, fintech revolution clearly is about making money, and it's growing very, very fast. You can make money on money and big data. Again, growing very fast. Many companies will not be competitive unless they use big data. You look at many companies in manufacturing and everywhere else, and they're all needing to leverage big data to stay competitive, to be able to be as efficient as others. But there are a number of trends which are about human instinct. Wearable, as soon as it actually helps you with your health and with your life longevity, it becomes about human instinct, and everybody will use it. And so it makes sense to look at the opportunities in this field, because once it take up, it will take up real big. Virtual reality, human instinct. People want to communicate. People want to have friends all over the world. My daughter, you know, when she was 15, had 300 friends from all around the world. I don't think I had so many friends in person, you know, when I was her age. That's because of social networks. So virtual reality can allow you to meet those friends in person. Artificial intelligence could be very much about basic human instincts on many circles. Safety, security, privacy, not yet, right? So people don't feel threatened. And this is very subtle change. You will feel threatened the first time your privacy will be lost by you. You will feel threatened. I've actually lost my privacy several times in the networks, and so I feel very protective of my data. But before I did it, I didn't care. And when I was talking about privacy, I'm actually very, very, it's my favorite trend, privacy. When I was talking in different panels about privacy in the past, say, 5 years, people said, I don't care, you know, I can open my data to anybody, right? I don't have anything private. But that's actually not true. There is a lot of your data which you would want to keep private from a lot of people. And you're just not really realizing what happens if even your close ones, even your loved ones will know everything about what you do during the day or during the email and so on and so forth. And finally, next generation computing could also affect our human instinct. And so those trends could be very big. There is a bit stretch about artificial intelligence and next generation computing. I think partially we put it up there because there was no space down there. But I believe actually they will affect basic human instincts. Important thing is when you think about your startup, or when you think about evaluating somebody else's startup to join it, or to invest in it, or to partner with it, even in case it looks strange, you should think whether it actually fits into one of those categories. And the higher it is in the category, the more likely it will be very successful. So quantum computers can be all of this at the same time, right? It will eternity. So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about this evolution. So, you know, tools made us humans, right? So, you know, people commonly perceived to be different from apes by the fact that they produce tools in mass. Mechanisms enable the modern industry, like this is a Gutenberg machine, right? Then electronics, right? So the next trend was electronics. This is a calculator. software-defined stuff. That's where we are today. Everything's becoming software-defined. But I think next big trend in this evolution is machine learning. And I've already touched on this. If you think about it, most of programs and devices we have today, they are smart, but really they're stupid. After we use them for a while, we do a lot of things with them in a certain sense. They don't really think very much about the context they're in. They don't know that much about us. And there is a huge opportunity to integrate machine learning in every device and in every program, and make those devices and make those programs not just convenient and usable, but also smart. And make them learn the context in which they're used and the person in which they're used. And that's where you get this huge investment in artificial intelligence of Google and Microsoft and Facebook. It's because future of IT and future of technology is in smart devices, smart keyboards, smart word processors, smart, smart everything. Now, that brings an interesting discussion into place, and whether smart means replacing humans. And you can read a lot of articles everywhere about it. And so you can think about those concepts: consciousness, free will, thinking, alive, feelings. Funny enough, as a physicist, I always thought those concepts are artificial, right? Now, as a modern technologist and computer scientist, I understand that they are very, very real. And when you move to the area of artificial intelligence, at the point when you make an artificial being, you have to sort of program those things, right? And some of them are well understood, like consciousness. And you can talk about whether dogs have conscious. I mean, there are some researchers, they say they do, and some researchers, they say they don't. And can you make a robot which is conscious? Not sure. And then you have a question: what is human intelligence? And this is one of the main and most interesting topics in modern science, because really people don't know how human brain operates. And really people don't know how human intelligence is. And there are very different views on this. So this guy on the left, Ray Kurzweil. Anybody know this guy here, right? So he has a very popular blog. He believes he figured out how to create a mind. So he created this book, How to Create a Mind. And so he really believes that human brain is a hot, wet Turing machine, and he figured out how it works. It just needs to be made more complex, and then it will come alive. Then this guy in the middle, he's a professor of MIT, Scott Aronson, and he wrote this not that simple book, but I recommend that you read it since you are studying here. It's exactly written for guys like you. It's about quantum computers, but it's for computer scientists. It's called Quantum Computing since Democritus. And in this book, he sort of takes an intermediate view. He sort of says, most likely, human brain is hot, wet Turing machine. So it's a computer. It's a classical computer, maybe complex one. But it's not so clear, right? There is lots of things which are not so clear, right? It might be that it's more than a Turing machine. It might be that we could not really know what it is. And what do you think? Is it a Turing machine? Do you guys know what is Turing machine here? So do you think it's a Turing machine? What do you think? No, not a Turing machine, right? And so here is this guy on the right, Roger Penrose, right? So he's in Oxford. He's more of a mathematician / philosopher. He's one of the better complexity theorists as well. And he believes human brain is beyond quantum computing, and in fact, larger than universe, right? So human conscious is sort of much more complex than universe, and the laws of universe are all part of our human conscious, right? In fact, the guy who wrote the middle book here once asked Roger Penrose if he believes that human brain is a quantum computer or classical computer or post-quantum computer. And Roger answered that most obviously it's well post-quantum computer. And all of those guys are very renowned scientists and very renowned technologists, some of them. And they wrote this wonderful books. I recommend that you read them. When I started in science, thinking about science, that was also something very puzzling for me, and it's still puzzling for me how human brain works. If you think about it, that's sort of the most complex question. My personal view is that I believe that humans are universal knowledge creators, and they are very special. So far, we don't know anything which is more special in the universe. And that is allowing to formulate the principle of optimism, which is well described in this book. Have you read this book, The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch? Pretty good book. I recommend that you read it as well. Is that all evils are caused by insufficient knowledge. And so technology which we will invent, even over the next 50 years, will not replace a human mind, but will only extend the human mind, will allow the human mind to become much more effective. Now, you know, if you think about this, we come back to Singapore, and we come back to Smart Nation, and while preparing to the speech, I read why Smart Nation, and I've read that Singapore have all these challenges: urban population, urban density, aging population, healthcare, mobility, energy sustainability, and that those trends are actually very modern for common world. And I believe that the wonderful thing about the trends I described, all those trends are required to solve those problems. And all those trends are moving towards the direction of solving those problems. And so if we look at Singapore 30 years from now, we will have everything connected to Internet of Things. We will have robots everywhere, drones, self-driving cars will drive us everywhere very fast without traffic jams. Everything will be printed on 3D printers. We will not have banks, right? Fintech revolution will kill them all if monetary authority will allow. Singapore special that way, right? Nothing happens without government allowing it. Wearables will be on all of us, and it will prolong our life. We'll live well over 100 years. We will all communicate all over the world without traveling with virtual reality. Big data will make our life and economics and industry efficient. Artificial intelligence will make things very smart around us. We will be completely digital, yet we will keep our privacy and control our privacy. And all of this will be enabled by next generation computing. However, for me, it comes to one trend. And this trend is that smart future is digital future. So everything becomes data. And so from that point, I formulated my own definition of singularity. People talk about these trends, and people like Ray Kurzweil and many other people talk about singularity. And so they define singularity in a variety of different ways. I define the singularity in my way, and my way is that digital world will become more important than physical. So today, well, think about it. I'm 44. When I sort of realized that I'm a person right around maybe 35 years ago, most of the world was physical. There was almost no digital world. There was no digital money. There was no digital anything. Today, a lot of the world is digital. I think 35 years from now, most of the world will be digital. Physical world will become less important than digital. Your digital assets will become more important than physical assets. And that's a big change. And so if you think about physical world, there are these 4 things which are basic necessities: air, water, food, and shelter, right? And I think that as every personal business process will be conducted with data, and there will be more and more data, it will become more and more valuable. Data and data protection will become one of the basic human needs. So losing your data will be equally bad to losing air. You will not be able to function as a person, as a professional without your data, as a business without your data. Many businesses today already cannot function with data. If Singapore loses the data of monetary authority of Singapore, Singapore economy will completely collapse, right? It's true even in case we're talking about some of the large banks. But it's not yet true for very small companies, and it's not yet true for individuals. It's just a matter of time before it becomes true. And, you know, I was thinking about data more and more as I came back to Acronis, and then I was thinking about that data is actually super important. If you look back right around 6,000 years ago, there was this one of the first organized civilizations on Earth, Egyptian civilization, right? 6,000 years ago, the pharaohs invented this way to eternity. They built these pyramids. Any of you been to Egypt? Been to pyramids? I've never been. Studied them a lot, but never been. They build those pyramids, and they store effectively digital data about themselves plus their DNA, right? Imagine 6,000 years ago, they kind of figured this out. So they would store stories about their lives. They will store basic objects about their, lives, and then they will store their mummies, which will keep their DNA. And to some extent, it served the purpose because they wanted to stay alive forever, and they kind of did. We know them. We don't know anybody much of their era except them. And technically, at some point, we might be able to restore them, to extract their DNA and to make a person out of it. And then we extract them, and when we take all the digital data which they store, which is very, very few fragments of their lives, we can even sort of put some personality in them. And, of course, if you come up with artificial intelligence the way Ray Kurzweil wants, we can actually even directly program them. So they will behave exactly like pharaohs of that time. And so I was thinking that, data is not just about life. It's not just about continuing business, but it's also about eternity and even about resurrection. If at some point people will invent artificial general intelligence, it will be possible to resurrect somebody like him, and you will not see the difference, right? He will be programmed, and he will behave exactly like this. I mean, he will move his leg exactly like this. He will say exactly the same words and exactly the same jokes. And, in some ways, if you can preserve his conscious in a computer over a long period of time, you can even restore his conscious, right? And so it's very, very important to do data protection. So use our products. Don't lose data. Everything which stays about you is not your photos and not your belongings, but the data about your lives and the data about your professional lives and the data about your businesses. I'm crazy about data protection. I have a tattoo about Acronis. I really want to stay in Acronis for the rest of my business career and build it into our first $100 billion company with headquarters in Singapore. So we have very, very aggressive goals. Data is a unique field which is one of the fields which is not having a global leader today. It's a huge market. Many hundreds of billions of dollars are spent on storage and storage software, but there is no clear leader. There are a bunch of old companies in the space, such as EMC, NetApp, Western Digital, Seagate, but they're all not doing really well. There are a bunch of new companies. There is nobody with large market share, and we want to build one. Singapore was always very good in storage. And so there is one more thing which I want to say. Do you want to change the world? Right now, you don't need to leave Singapore to change the world. Singapore is rapidly becoming extremely good in that sense. When I first came to Singapore 22 years ago, there were universities here, but they were not in top 100, and they were not scientific universities. They didn't do world science, and they didn't do world-class technology. Today they do, and not only, but there is Acronis, and so you should definitely come and join Acronis. We're building R&D here, which builds new generation storage software. We're collaborating with all the research institutions. We intend to have 100 to 150 people in the core R&D here in Singapore. Very important, our R&D here is not a satellite office, it's a core R&D. That's a headquarters, that's where I'm based, and it's most advanced research, which is conducted here. If you don't want to join Acronis, you can bring your business plan to Runa Capital and Fistech Ventures. We both have presence here. Runa Capital is $300 million under management, invest $1 to $15 million US in a round. And Dmitry is a partner who looks after Singapore. Olga is a partner who works in Fistech Ventures. And Fistech Ventures invest from $0 to $1 million. These are two sister funds or brother funds, depends on how you want to call it. And has about $30 million under management. So join Acronis or bring your business plan to Runa Capital or Fistech Ventures. Thank you.